Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Kellen here with Droid Life. So I've got in front of me the Moto Z2 Play. Now this is the follow-up to last year's Moto Z Play, a phone that for whatever reason I really got excited about, even as it was sort of a mid-tier-ish phone. So anyway, when Motorola offered to send over a review unit of the Z2 Play for us to play with for a little bit, jumped on that. And so let's dive into this and start working up towards that full review. Anyway, this is our Moto Z2 Play unboxing. So again, this is the follow-up to last year's Z Play, and really was one of those sleeper hits in Android. I loved it so much because not only did you get that sort of stock Android experience with Motorola's suite of features on top, it just had insane battery life. Like, I've never seen a phone, I don't know that I'll ever see a phone that lasts as long as that phone did. It would last 2 days, and that's not an exaggeration. It actually did last that long. So anyway, Z2 Play, we're just interested to see if it can keep up at all there. Now I know the battery has been dropped down in capacity from that version, so I don't know if we're going to get as good a battery, and the processor has been improved, so maybe there's a balancing act there. But the other thing with these Z phones obviously is the Moto Mod stuff. So I do actually have a couple of the 2 new Moto Mods as well. So this is the Turbo Power Pack, which charges faster than the old sort of sippy battery packs that they originally came out with, and this is the JBL Sound Boost 2 speaker. So we'll play with these a little bit, but that's one of the great things is, like, even if you own the original Moto Z Play, these new ones work, but these new ones also work on the new devices. So form factor there is kind of making that happen for a while. So anyway, here's the phone, Moto Z2 Play. Obviously this is the Verizon version, so it is coming to Verizon. It's not called the Moto Z Play 2 Droid or anything like that. They took away the Droid branding. It's just the Moto Z2 Play. So I don't know if that's the death of Droid or what's going on there. But anyway, the phone's coming soon. Unlocked version will be $499 through Motorola's site. Not exactly sure just yet what the Verizon version will cost or exact date for it to be released, but should have those details shortly. So here's the phone, and we'll get it out of the box here. So phone there, I'm just going to set that down since this is an unboxing and dive in. So you've got guides here. There's something shaking around in there. I'm assuming that's the SIM removal tool. I'm not going to open that up. And then they also are including a turbo power charger in the box. One thing I appreciate about this one is it is separate. It's a separate cable and charger. So in some of the previous phones that Motorola has released, not necessarily the Z line, but I think the Z Play, actually, the original one was like this, where this was an attached power adapter and cable, so you couldn't swap out for your own cable or a lengthier one or something like that. So anyway, those are separate now, which is nice. All right, so let's move that stuff out of the way and get into the phone. So to recap here, as we take this front sticker off, if I can. Motorola always makes some of the trickier ones to get off. I swear I sit here for this long every time. There we go. So we'll pull that thing off. On the back, there is no sticker on there as well. So to recap specs, though, again, that form factor is going to stay almost identical to last year's, and it has to because the Moto Mods have to be able to fit. And Motorola essentially told us for years to come, up to 3 years, if you buy like say the original Z Play or Z, the Moto Mods for the next 2 or 3 years will fit on it. So they've kind of backed themselves into this corner here in terms of this shape and size, and yeah, so very similar, familiar look. You do have the Moto logo up here. There's your front flash and your front camera and your front speaker. This is also the external speaker. There isn't one down here on the bottom. You do have Fingerprint Reader here as well. It's kind of changed a little bit in design. It's just a little more round and bubbly. As far as the display goes, and we'll fire this up so you can see it a little bit, if that worked. It is a 5.5-inch Full HD Super AMOLED display. So not LCD, but is AMOLED, but it's also not Quad HD. It's Full HD, same thing as last year. It has Gorilla Glass. On the back here, you do have a 12-megapixel f1.7 camera with 1.4... Thank you, Moto. Hello. F1.4 micron pixels. So improved camera over last year's shooter, even though the resolution, I believe, has dropped down slightly. The front, you saw that 5-megapixel shooter, which is a wide-angle lens. So should get some decent shots out of that. Where things start changing, though, is inside you have a Snapdragon 626 processor. So the previous one was a 625, and I wrote a whole piece about how great the 625 is, at least when Motorola is working with them. All the 625 phones I use from Motorola they just lasted days and days. So that's like the Moto G5 Plus, I think it was, and then of course the regular Moto Z Play. So this is a Snapdragon 626, slightly newer. I'm assuming it's going to be just as efficient as ever, and I hope so, because inside there we have a 3,000 milliamp hour battery, and last year's Z Play had a 3510 milliamp hour battery. So they dropped that down quite a bit. So that reduction just kind of worries me. I'm sure the phone's still going to last a long time, but just not going to be king of the hill type of battery life. In terms of design, you can see sort of antenna line going all the way around. There is your pin setup for all of your Moto Mods, and they just attach on there just like they have in the past. If we take a little tour of the device up top here, that is your SIM tray, and that should also be where your micro SD card goes. On this right side over here are your buttons. So you have a volume up and down separated rocker button there, and then you have a power switch here with a little texture that hopefully will allow you to tell that apart. Flip over to this left side, there's actually nothing. It's just pure smoothness. And then on the bottom, so you'll see we have USB Type-C port here, and then you do have a 3.5mm headphone jack. That's actually shocking to me, because the Moto Z, the original Moto Z, the flagship from last year, was essentially this thin, and they ditched the headphone jack. And there was one of the first phones on Android we saw without a headphone jack, but this Z Play is just as thin, and Motorola managed to slide that back. And so you have to wonder if there was a little bit of backlash there when they ditched it, and so they said, look, we just need to keep this going forward. And look, I mean, this phone is ridiculously thin, and they did manage to get one in there, so props to you guys, Motorola. Then again, they also have this giant chin down here at the bottom, so they got plenty of space to put in a headphone jack. Of course, you have a pretty substantial camera hump here, and that's just because they tried to keep the phone really thin. And when you put Moto Mods on there, they usually sort of shore up that hump there and flatten things out. But it is a pretty decent hump. It looks a lot like that original Moto Z from last year. The phone comes in gray, or it will also come in gold, I believe. And yeah, again, it costs about $499 on unlocked, and again, Verizon stuff, we're still waiting for that. But it will be a GSM unlocked phone, and then this, of course, works on Verizon. There's no waterproofing here, although it does have a water repellent nano coating. But overall, this phone is ridiculously thin. Looks very much like all the Moto Zs that we've seen in the past. Just for comparison's sake, here is actually the original Moto Z Play. So definitely a different look on the back. You've got this sort of softer touch metal finish, whereas here you had kind of a glass and plasticky look. They both had that hump on them, though. So they still have humps. You can see the pin styling down there for where Moto Mods attach. And if you flip over, they actually look pretty similar up front, but you can see down on the bottom is where that fingerprint reader changes. It was a square last year, whereas this year they're going with this sort of rounder, softer feel, which I do appreciate. This square fingerprint reader Motorola used for a while was quite odd. But you can see up top, it's almost identical. There's just not a lot of differences here. This is one of those differences, and this is where that battery change comes in. You can just see how ridiculously thin this new one is versus the old. It's actually pretty crazy to look at. So anyways, this has just been a quick unboxing. We'll dive into some software and things like that very soon. We'll have a review, and we would definitely want to test the battery life and all of that stuff. But for now, just an unboxing. Moto Z2 Play in-house. If you guys have comments, questions, let us know. We'll be sure to answer those. We're Droid Life. Peace.